All right, fellas, I think we are live. Coast to Coast podcast coming at you all tonight. Hope that folks can see and or hear us. I will go ahead and say now, first time I've done this, trying to produce this live deal, and so I'm going to ask for some grace tonight from our people. Um, I had no idea if anybody's actually here or not. Folks, if you can hear us, give us a thumbs up or a comment in the chat. But again, first time we've done this, so if this all goes to hell in a handbasket, I'll wear it. I'll try to practice harder. I'll go back and refocus and do better next time. But either way, live version of the Coast to Coast podcast, kind of atypical. Want to do some different things. Hey, shout out to everybody who's in the chat already letting us know that it's going well. So thank y'all. With me as always, Sean Moran, Sherrell McMillan. Going to do this a little different again because it's live. Not a ton going on this past week. We do want to hit a couple of things, but a little bit later, we're actually going to try to take some questions from you guys. So if you've got really good questions, hang tight. We'll give you a spot to drop those in a little bit later. Obviously, keep in mind uh, we can't really talk about stuff that we can't go live with. So keep that in mind when you're asking questions, but definitely want to give this a try and interact with you guys tonight because we definitely appreciate all y'all being a part of the show. As you well know, we are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. We're big fans of them, and we appreciate all the work that they do for Inside Carolina and all they do for you guys. So glad you guys are here. With that said, let's go ahead and get rolling. Sean Moran, the biggest thing that I can think of that came out of this past week was live period number 2. And I know you've been grinding. You did a great. Well, actually, let's stop. Let's start on your breakdown of Paxson Wojcik's game because I think that was really cool that you did the video write up of him. And for those of you in the chat or for those of you who listen to us later on, if you have not seen Sean's video breakdowns he does of these commits that UNC is getting, I highly recommend them. I can't say enough about how good they are. Absolutely, just great insight. Sean does a good job with his detail and just giving things that you probably hadn't considered with seeing these guys. So, Sean, let's talk about the Paxson Wojcik video you did first that is available on the premium message boards. What jumped out at you about his game that maybe you had not seen beforehand when you sat down for this multiple viewing and started cutting things up?
Well, first on the video front, I'd say I'm still extremely amateur on making them. Have gotten a little better on it, but I think for me, really the important thing is having people see the pros and the cons versus just a highlight film, where I think you can make anybody look stupendous in a highlight film. So I think that's really what I want to come across in any of these videos is, hey, what are the strengths, but also watching some of the misses or watching some of the turnovers and seeing the bad with the good. So just to kind of catch on that, but hopefully we'll be adding a few little wrinkles to the videos as we go forward. But in terms of Wojcik, once again the first transfer to almost had me going Sherrell style on that one. Obviously the first transfer to commit to UNC, and once again I think what we've talked about with him, we're not expecting a starter. What we're expecting is a guy to come off the bench. I think the intangibles is what he's going to bring to the team from experience and leadership. And I'm sure in practice is going to be getting after guys on both ends of the floor. But in terms of his overall season, he kind of did a lot of everything. Close to 15 points, 7 rebounds for a 6'4", 6'5" guard is pretty impressive. Plus a little over 3 assists. So he kind of had his hands in everything, making second team all Ivy League. In the game that we focused on, it was his last game of the season, senior night. It happened to be one of his better games, so 25 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. But I think in that you're able to see the versatility. You're able to see him attacking the rim. I think obviously attacking the rim in the Ivy League is going to be a little different than in the ACC. But I think he, not the quickest guy, so that first step he's not gonna just explode by people. But I think he does have that threat, 38% from 3, and he will look to attack. I think especially if he gets switched in the pick and roll against a bigger guy. So at the end of the video, added in some of his made buckets from the Carolina game and some of the lineups that were using that between I was seeing some Brady Manick, Dawson Garcia, and McCoy out on the floor. So he was definitely getting some of the bigger guys in Caleb Love. But he's a tough guy. He can attack. Once again, I think proper expectations. We're not expecting him to come in, be a starter, average 15 points. But if he can provide some reliable bench minutes, I think he can. I think against top level ACC teams, sometimes we might not see him get on the floor, but I think if you're looking for a guy to come in and be aggressive and I think be able to play 10 plus minutes in the majority of games, that's what you're getting in Paxson.
And think about how many times last year that North Carolina could have used anybody to come in and hit an open jump shot. I think that's something I took away from your film breakdown is that he's got the capability of hitting jumpers. His feet look a little weird sometimes. Does that bother you at all, or is that maybe just me picking nits?
Well, I mean, he shot well 38% this year, but it was definitely a jump from previously. I think for me, it's more going to be the speed. I think we saw him play against UNC, play against Michigan State, Northwestern, etc. But it's going to be that higher level speed and athleticism on a daily basis. So I think that'll be the biggest adjustment for me. Is he able to get open looks, or is he able to um, and I don't think even if he's attacking, if he can attack and kick, especially with the shooters that UNC's added, that'll be huge. But once again, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if he might become captain of the team, just given what you kind of see on the floor. Obviously another fiery personality, but I think from a practice perspective, I see him in the mold of his dad. Of he's not going to take anything from anybody, and he's going to be going at you despite maybe not have he didn't go to the Naval Academy, but I think that just that upbringing will pay off in practice.
And I do want to say to the folks that are tuned in right now, almost 200 people have jumped in. Thank you guys for being a part of this kind of, again, we're trying this thing out live, see how it goes. If I sound more like I've got my head in a toilet than usual, forgive me. We've had some RSV going around the house and some itis, and I'm looking forward to finishing up the show so I can go get some tussin in me. But if I do sound
Well,
a little rough, forgive me. Sean, how
I do
are
not
you
have a
back now?
Gatorade. I do not have a Gatorade with me this time, so I'm good.
Well, let's bring in Sherrell. Sherrell, we're going to, I guess, quickly segue over to talking about live period 2 and some more EYBL action this weekend. Is there anything you can share with us about who the Tar Heel staff seemed to be targeting that maybe we didn't see when we were predicting this last week?
I think it stayed pretty static. For our premium subscribers, there's a note about one in particular that I think caught our eye. But in general, I would say they did a good job. Again, we weren't on the road this weekend, so I'm gonna put that caveat out there. We were out last week, but not this week. But they did a good job of just kind of staying after the guys that they either identified here in the last few months or saw last week or offered last week, that being Peterson and Koa Pete. And then as well, Caleb Wilson. We talked about him a few times. He's a 2025 wing from Georgia who played against Drake Powell last weekend, a really good game. Uh, Brad Frederick and Sean May both watched him in Atlanta, and then Jeff Lebo and Hubert Davis watched him at EYBL this past weekend. So he's one I think we should probably monitor to see if North Carolina gets more serious here in the coming days and weeks. But I think overall, pretty much most of what we expected, minus that kind of one player who got a lot more attention. In 2024. We'll just leave it at that. That's something that you can read on the premium board in the evaluation thread.
Well, I'm just going to assume that everybody that's in this chat right now is an Inside Carolina premium member, and if you're not, man, I can't say how much shame and rotten food and spoiled fruit needs to be thrown at you for not being a premium member of IC. Sean, give me some stats from this past weekend in the second live period. Who statistically jumped out at you and maybe kind of got your attention a little bit?
I think from a statistical standpoint, we should just start with who UNC has committed. Because last week Drake Powell was the MVP. I think from a stats perspective, it was going to be tough to stay at that level, and he definitely came down from a stats perspective. So over the 4 games, he was a little under 10 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and I think was 1 for 9 from 3, and shooting below 28 or below 30% now over the course. So I think that will be something to track in May, is that shooting, because that has always been the main talking point. Something that you saw get better in high school, you saw look good last week. But I think in the overall thread on the premium board, there was one move that Trevor William Marks highlighted, and I had to watch it time and time again, because he literally just did a jab step and just froze and shook the defender and drove hard right, went to the rim for a dunk, and that was something last year. He would, if he did look to attack, he would look to get into the paint and almost just kick it out to an open shooter, because that's how unselfish he was. But I think you've seen that transformation where, he can get straight to the basket and just dunk in traffic. So I think just seeing that one move, despite all the stats, once again, super impressive and enthusiastic for what is still to come with Drake Powell. But from a stat point, I mean, Elliot Cadeau, he put up almost a triple double today on Sunday. I know EYBL they've always been keeping track of stats. It's hard to now find them with the different websites they've used, but I wouldn't be surprised if Cadeau sets the all-time EYBL record in assists. Right now, he's he's at a 5-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He had 33 this weekend, and each game is pretty much double figures almost. So he's, everybody knows he's a great passer, but I think he's showing that time and time again. And he's been shooting the ball, and his free throw percentage is up. So he's been continuing to play tremendous. I would imagine he might be, first team when they come out with their selections. And then James Brown, I do want to watch more of him. I haven't really seen a lot of his Mocan Elite games. I wish he had stayed on Mean Streets, just due to how often they had played and probably that role. But obviously going, and getting ready with Link Academy, it makes sense. But he had he had one really good game, very efficient in 15 minutes, 13.7 boards. But I think those are, just from a UNC perspective, those are how the three guys performed. But once again, Elliot Cadeau just staking his claim as the best point guard. I don't think there's any question on the best pure passer in EYBL, and probably, whenever he does get to college, it'll probably be number one in that right off the bat.
I want to go to James Brown a little bit, because I do think in the midst of how well Drake and Cadeau have played, there's been a little bit of disappointment in how Brown has played. And I understand that, but my response would be, just like with everything, he's playing on a new team, as you said, Sean. And Mocan, if you know the history kind of like of EYBL and AAU basketball, they always have multiple 6'9", 6'10" guys. So a lot of AAU teams have one big or 1.5 bigs, and Mocan has like 3.5. So adding Brown probably was a little bit of overkill this year, but I do think it's good for his development to play against those kind of guys in practice. He did it at St. Rita. He's going to do it at Link, and now he's doing it at Mocan. So, the idea that, and this is not to disparage him as a player, but the idea that James Brown was going to come in as a freshman and, be Armando Bacot, I think people needed to dissuade themselves of that now. And I think we've tried to say that over the last couple of years. In time, I think he can be a good player, but he knows he's got more development and he knows he needs to get better. That's the reason he chose to go to Link Academy, because it is, no disrespect to Branson, Missouri, but outside of studying and playing basketball, there's not a ton to do unless you watch Ozark, and then there's a lot of
clearly you have never spent a night going to see the off Broadway country shows in Branson, Missouri, sir. I am judging you.
It's Myrtle Beach in Missouri, right?
It's Myrtle Beach of the Mississippi Delta, correct?
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, there's not much else to do there. So he's going to be locked in for the next year to get better. So I understand that he has to produce and for his ranking to stay what it is. And to be frank, I don't think it's going to stay where it is. But that doesn't mean that he can't be a good player for UNC. So as that happens, just trying to get ahead of it and let people prepare themselves for that coming, but also know that he still is talented and he still has a chance to be a good basketball player. It's just not going to be, as a starter in year one or anything like that.
I like that, Sherrill. You've always done a really good job of kind of adding some or tempering expectations, but also adding perspective. And I think recognizing that, his entire life has basically just been uprooted and moved to two new programs, over the last couple of months. And that's hard for anybody, much less somebody at his age. And if there's anybody who can handle it, as we learned when we talked to him a while back, it's probably James Brown. Anything else you guys want to mention talking about EYBL or the Adidas circuit this past weekend? Sean, anything you want to add before we move on to something else?
No, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see what happened. Last week it was pretty quick in terms of the two offers in 2025 after Hubert Davis was at Adidas. So now that he was on the EYBL circuit, it'll be interesting to see what comes next, whether it is some more on the Adidas, if it's 2024, or what happens from the Nike in 2025. So pretty excited to see over the next 2 to 3 days what comes out of Chapel Hill in terms of this second live recruiting period. And once again, that wraps it up until July from a live recruit. Well, besides the high school stanzas, but in terms of AAU, so it'll be a long mid-season until we get back to July.
Shauna, I wanted to ask you something real quick. Darren Peterson, what position would you consider him? What role would you consider him as?
I think, I mean, a old school shooting guard, where I know we've between point guard and combo guards and shooting guards and wing forwards, but I think kind of a pure shooting guard with 6'5", great size. I think has really good, some pretty good mechanics on his shot. You can see it, especially on the mid range and that length. So I'd love to know what his wingspan is, because I mean, he just once he gets to the rim, he just he's throwing down so easily. For somebody going into the junior class, but I would put him as a shooting guard.
Follow-up question: what would you consider Isaiah Harwell?
I'd say more of a combo guard with him, because I think even last year when he was playing on the 17 under AAU circuit in Adidas, he had the ball in his hands a lot, and running point. Not to say that Peterson does not have the ball in his hands, but I think he's more of a get it to him on the wing, kind of look to attack off the dribble, but he's not. I don't see him having the ball in his hands as much, bringing the ball up the court, initiating offense, things of that nature.
Gotcha. I asked that because we've seen kind of how Hubert Davis has handled recruitments since he's gotten here.
Yeah.
And Isaiah Harwell has had an offer now since September. So he was by himself for October, November, December, January, February, March, almost 7 months that he had to offer by himself. Same thing that happened with Cam Scott in the 2024 class and with Drake Powell. He got an offer in February, had the offer by himself until late July. So I wonder, if this is kind of one of those, all right, you had your shot, it's still yours, but it's not yours to yourself anymore. Obviously, Peterson's a top 5, can't miss national prospect. So it could just be that he's a talented player that UNC wanted to talk to. But it's always interesting to see kind of those recruiting battles shape out early. So I wanted to ask you that. And then the other thing I would say is that I'm not going to promise anything, but we hope to have some people on here in the next couple of weeks to kind of talk about those two live periods who kind of saw Adidas and Nike, whereas we only got to see Nike live. So hopefully that'll be upcoming. But I don't want to promise anything, but we hope it's coming.
I love the way you temper expectations, Sherrill, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing, and one of the things I've just come to love about you. One thing that did happen with North Carolina this week, and I see reported it, Marcus Paige is coming home. I think that seeing that Jack Emanuel left to take a job with American University up in DC, I believe that's where he ended up as assistant on the bench there, leaves his role open now for Marcus Paige. And if anybody had really been paying attention, Marcus's pro career had started to slow down. He had been spending a lot of time in Chapel Hill. I think he was dealing with some chronic injuries. Don't quote me on that, but I think I remember seeing that. And so getting a guy like Marcus Paige back in the program, I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head that might be loved and be loved more than Marcus Paige. Sherrill, what does that mean to bring a guy like that home? And if you can tell a little bit about what you think he might be doing, feel free.
I mean, it's massive. It's a big thing because one, you always want to have different perspectives in your staff, different viewpoints, different ideas, and you know, frankly, Marcus is younger. He's going to be younger than anyone else on staff by about 10 years. May, maybe a little more. I think Hoots is my age. So yeah, about 10 or 11 years, he's going to be the youngest one on staff. So I think that's an important part. And you think about how Marcus Paige kind of co-led along with Roy Williams UNC through the mid 2010s. I mean, it was a pretty tumultuous period, and I don't think you can ask for a better representative at a better time. Like some people might have been better representatives, some people were better basketball players, but no one had that combination when North Carolina needed it the most, more than Marcus Paige. That's why I always go back to, a 2012 class, and you start talking about the LJ Rose Marcus Paige thing, and just the alternate timeline where LJ Rose commits to UNC before Marcus Paige, and it just feels like it would have been disastrous because Paige was the perfect recruit at the perfect time for UNC, and I think he can help on staff, doing some of the same things that Jackie did, but also kind of being an ear for the players. I think everybody knows that there's always a bit of good cop, bad cop with parenting. I think it's the same with coaching. And maybe Marcus can be that ear, just extra ear for guys to talk about something. They're going to have some really dynamic guards come through here in the next couple of years. So you think Paige would probably have some advice about how to play and live in the limelight at UNC in the last 10 years? I just think that's invaluable, in addition to kind of the stuff that is going to be assigned to him that Jackie had as well. So yeah, a great hire. Roy Williams always talked about just how smart Marcus Paige was, how he got it, and I think you will start to see that as he begins, what could be a lengthy coaching career. As far as that question is concerned,
Yeah, well, I'm going to lead you into that. The Orange Shovel said, since Marcus Page's off-court position, how involved can he be during summer workouts and pickup games?
I'm going to answer this with confidence, even though I'm not confident in the actual answer, but can't do anything. For one, summer pickup games, if it's not an official practice, coaches can't be there at all. So all that stuff and that's part of where Antoine Jameson and Vince Carter's kind of frustration, I think, came in. All that stuff is team led. Like Hubert Davis can say, "You guys playing pickup?" He can kind of infer that he wants them to do it, but it's up to the players to put it together. As far as on the court stuff, there was some rule changes or bylaws out there that were pushing to get more people to be allowed to have on-court instruction. But I think that's I don't know this personally, but I think that's one of the reasons that Jackie Manuel is leaving, because he wants to be on the court coaching. And in his role, which unless it's changing, Marcus Paige will have the same thing. He can't do anything with guys on the court during practice or anything like that.
I think one of the big things, and I don't know that this has been reported a lot, I think one of the big things is the reason why Marcus Paige is coming back is probably because of Johnny Tshirt. I would guess that he's missed that during his time playing pro ball overseas. While I do recognize that Johnny Tshirt has amazing shipping and they're really good about getting your gear to you in a quick, fast, and in a hurry manner, it's just not the same as being able to walk in off of East Franklin Street and just go into the store and experience their amazing customer service or lay hands on the actual goods that they have right there in the store. That's different, right? And I think that's probably one of the big things in bringing Marcus Paige back to town. So I'm sure he will be using that quite a bit, making his presence back in town seen, but also felt in how much time he will be buying things from Johnny T-Shirt. We appreciate Johnny T-Shirt. Shout out to them for sponsoring the show. Hit them up right now if you need your summer gear, johnnytshirt.com, or go see them on Franklin Street. Alumni owned and operated. We really appreciate them. We're thankful for what they do to sponsor this show. All right, get your questions in. Sean, if you've got to bail, man, feel free. I know you've got daddy duties coming up, so nobody here is going to judge you. So I want to go ahead and start getting some of these questions in from the chat. And guys, like I said, this is new. Can't obviously answer everything, but we will try to get as much information to you as we can with regard to protecting sources and making sure that we can verify things as we've seen. So Sherrell already addressed the Marcus Paige kind of feeling out what his role is going to be with the program. I think he did a good job there. Sherrell, I'll go ahead and hit you with this one. from Larry Swearingen, any Jaron Stevenson updates or comments? Which I think this is $1 million question on the premium message boards right now. So I'll drop this one up here.
Do you want the updates or you want the comments, Larry? No,
Spicy Rel is my favorite
uh,
Rel.
I'm joking. Obviously, Jaron Stevenson is the 2024 forward. He goes to Seaforth High School there in Pittsburgh. I think about 15, 20 minutes from the Smith Center. So obviously, very close. His mother played basketball at UNC. His dad played at the University of Richmond. Shouts to Ben. And then went overseas and played in Asia and a few other places for more than a decade. So really well-renowned player, in Asia. Uh, his recruitment has been interesting. He was the first 2024 player to get an offer from UNC. He was offered in October of 2021. So before Hubert Davis had played a game, he had already offered Jaron Stevenson a scholarship. Since then, he's taken probably 9 or 10 unofficial visits to UNC over the last couple of years. However, he's not taken an official visit. He's been to UVA for an official visit. That was his most recent. He's been to Missouri and he's been to Georgetown. So those are the three thus far official visits that he's taken. Because he's a junior, he has until July 31st to take his 5 unofficial visits, and then 5 official visits. And then I believe on August 1st, the rule changes. He can take as many as he wants. So that's kind of where the recruitment stands. There are, I think, discussions about a potential reclass at the school of his choice. And the last time we talked to his family, they still want to do a UNC official visit, and they said that UNC is still recruiting Jaron, pretty hard. So I think that's where things stands. And frankly, I think the family it just has a decision to make. That's basically what they said, is that they need to decide by the end of the summer if he's going to stay in 2024 or if he's going to reclass up into 2023. So that's where it's at. And I think for UNC, there's not much more that needs to be said. I think they've kind of, I don't want to say rested their case, but he kind of knows UNC inside and out. And we'll see if they take advantage of still being able to take an official visit there.
Sherrell, this question is from Joey in Durham.
Well,
Go ahead.
maybe
Go ahead, Sean.
just real quick on, for EYBL now, it's 2 weeks, and he's a little under 12 points and 4 rebounds, struggling from 3. So I think his 2 weeks of EYBL have been lukewarm at best, I would say, and I do think whether it's UNC or wherever, I don't currently not looking at him as a one and done prospect. Maybe it's taken him a little while to get acclimated after playing at Seaforth this season, and maybe July will be different. But I think I'd say kind of an average performance at best so far over 2 weeks for him.
So, Sherrell, the question I was going to ask you is, what goes into a player's family considering a reclass like that? Because I think about last year at this time, and even for the most part, while North Carolina was recruiting Stevenson, I don't know that reclassing was even on the radar, at least in our orbit here in South Carolina. What kind of comes into a kid's, I guess, rhetoric and his line of thinking when that comes up? Is it just wanting to get to where you're getting a paycheck for basketball sooner, or does something change around around his experience that maybe altered their line of thinking or their desired path, to use one of your terms?
This is like every Mission Impossible movie ever, where like Ethan Hunt is trying to not step on wires and like trying to get into the safe and deliver something without tripping off any alarms. So I'm gonna try and like jump over stuff and like suspend myself in midair and answer this question. But I think a lot of times it is, if you can graduate high school quicker, you can play in college quicker, your year runs out, you can get to the NBA draft quicker. That was the Gigi Jackson model. That was the whole idea, was why wait? If you have a lottery ticket in your hand, why wait, you know, 14 months to cash it when you can cash it in 7 months? It's kind of the idea, I think, for a lot of kids. For some kids, it's just frankly, they're too good to still be playing in high school basketball. They've done everything, they've accomplished everything, and it's just the next logical step to go ahead and move forward. And I think for other kids, it's a chance to go ahead and get jump started on their development and have access to world class facilities that you wouldn't have at high school unless you go to like IMG or something. So I think those are all three viable paths and reasons for kids. In the end, it's a family decision, and I know from a basketball perspective we might talk about it, but I try not to really say too much about each individual family's decision for their son because they know their sons better than we do, and ultimately it comes down to the circle, and the circle is almost always, mom, dad, and a couple of trusted advisors. So for us, from a basketball standpoint, do I think 97% of these guys are ready to reclassify? No, I think there's one or two per class who has checked all the boxes, who can do all the things, who's ready to go. But outside of that, usually, from a basketball perspective, the best decision tends to be staying in your class. I hope I answered your question. I went a long way around, but I think those are the three typical reasons that guys reclass.
When I tried to ask it, knowing that there were going to be landmines there, and I think you did an expert job of avoiding those. A question in the chat from at WH1315. Assuming UNC attracts another ball dominant guard, can RJ be as effective off the ball? And I'm going to ask both of you guys this because I think it's a question that both of you can speak to in different ways. I'm going to take out the first part about UNC attracting another ball dominant guard. I mean, I think the underlying question there is Elliot Cadeau a reclass. Either way, let's go back and just ask, can RJ, do you guys think RJ with another year in his belt can share primary ball handling duties? And I think we saw that be an issue a little bit last year with Caleb Love a little bit. Sean, I'm going to come to you first with that one.
So it's a good question. I mean, look, I think for UNC to be at its best, you don't want RJ Davis always running transition. Just being blunt, the ball never really left his hands that much in terms of transition play. There's some times where he pushed it up, defensive rebound all the way up himself, which worked out. But in terms of just kind of that free flowing 3-on-2, 2-on-1, you definitely, I think, need another guard. Once again, somebody like Elliot could do that could pass. But even if you do have another guard that is ball dominant or needs the ball in his hands, RJ is a scorer. He can handle the ball, he can set everything up, but at the end of the day, UNC is going to need him to score, and he's going to have to, hopefully see a slight, I'd say maybe increase in his shots because before he got injured in that ACC play, I mean he was playing lights out, 40% plus, and once again, you're going on the thought that there's two studs in RJ and Armando, and then you're fitting the pieces around them both from a shooting, ball handling, spacing perspective. So I don't see any issue with him not always having the ball in his hands because you do want him to also be focused on scoring. I know he sees himself as a point guard, but at the end of the day, whether it's the NBA, G League, or Europe, he's going to be asked to score, and he's going to that's just who he is. So he's never going to be a guy that's scoring 8 points and dishing out 10 assists regularly. So I think you want him doing what he's most natural at, and having a guy that can help that and further that, I think would be great for the ceiling on this team.
All right, Sean, and I know you have to go take care of daddy duties, so
and with
go with
that,
God.
I'm out. So
All right.
It's good to see all the questions on this, and looking forward to watching the other questions that Joey hit Sherrell with after this. But thanks everybody for jumping in.
All right, brother. Take care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon. That's Sean Moran, coming all the way from the West Coast. We appreciate you making time for us tonight. All right, Sherrell, I want to ask you, man. Sitting here, hearing Sean's response about RJ, and then seeing some of the, I guess, differing lines of thought in the chat. I'm going to ask you the same question: can RJ be as effective off the ball if he's not the primary ball handler? And does that limit UNC ceiling, or do you think those two things are correlated at all?
Yeah, I think the question was, can he be effective playing beside a ball dominant guard? Right? That was the question? Okay. I'm just going to pause for 5 seconds to let people think. I mean, he played with Caleb Love last year. So Caleb Love is a ball dominant guard. And I think he played pretty well outside of when his finger was pretty much broken or injured or sprained or whatever it was. I think there's been stretches here the last couple of years where he's played pretty well. I mean, his shooting numbers, in stretches again have been at an All-American level. So I think the question is a little odd for me because let's just be real. Everyone's talking about Elliot Cadeau. We can say it out loud. He's mulling a reclass. So the question is, will it hurt RJ playing off the ball beside Elliot Cadeau? And I would say no. The only way it would hurt RJ if it's something he doesn't really want to do, and then it causes some issues within the team. But from a pure on the court basketball perspective, at least offensively, I mean, playing beside Elliot Cadeau is kind of what you want because you're going to get open looks. You're going to get a lot of open looks, and RJ has shown that he has the propensity to knock down open looks. I don't have the stat in front of me. I think someone said it was something like 41 or 42% on catch and shoot threes. Well, with a point guard like Elliot Cadeau in this hypothetical, he's going to be getting a lot of catch and shoot threes. With a wing forward like Harrison Ingram, who can post, who can pass, who can swing, who can whip it around the court. He's going to get a lot of catch and shoot threes. So yes, he can do it. Obviously, I think 100% he can, and I think he could be good at it. It's just a matter of kind of meshing the things that he wants to do and learn and grow as a player with what is potentially best for next year's team. So those two have to match, and those two things have to work together.
I think also if you were coming off of a season where Hubert Davis um, and his staff had done a little bit better, I don't think as many people would have this many questions about, can two players exist? I think there'd be a little more trust. But I do understand why folks are a little skeptical of a potential Cadeau reclass plus RJ, knowing what they just saw with RJ and Caleb Love. That's an easy thing to point to and say, hey, that can't work.
Right, 100%. I get it, but you have to know that Caleb and Cadeau are completely different players in the way
Yeah.
they approach, in the way they attack, in their strengths and their weaknesses, just very, very different. So you can't really, plot on top of potentially Cadeau Davis the struggles and the issues of Love Davis, because it just would be completely different. Now there may be new struggles that arise that we can't foresee. I see someone talking about them being, kind of on the smaller side defensively. That could be one. There could be stuff that happens that we just don't foresee. But I don't think you can look at last year and say, well, if RJ is off the ball, then that's not good for UNC. Or if RJ is on the ball and there's another guard off the ball, then that's not good for UNC. It's different players.
A lot of different folks have asked questions in the chat. I'm not going to hit you about any specific player that is much less not in the transfer portal, uh, which definitely means that we can't confirm any sort of contact. But would you mind sharing with the folks that are here so far how you feel like North Carolina is working things behind the scenes? Are they still working things behind the scenes, or is it important for folks to just hang tight until that NBA draft withdrawal process starts?
I think we had a podcast earlier this year titled like "Quiet but Not Inactive" or something like that, and I just had to remind people of that. Like just because it was a relatively quiet week from a UNC basketball perspective doesn't mean that it was inactive. I saw they gave out a couple of offers. They could be talking to some portal guys, as we've explained here basically since this whole thing started on March 12th, which feels like 7 years ago. The UNC staff likes to move quietly and they like to do things without a lot of people knowing. That's why, it took us so long to confirm that Cormac Ryan was visiting. That's why it took us so long to confirm that Harrison Ingram was visiting. That's why it took us so long to confirm that Paxson Wojcik was visiting, and on and on and on. So they could still be talking to people and we just don't know about it. I don't necessarily know that that's the case as far as portal guys. I think maybe they are looking to see any new names that come through, and then monitoring who gets NBA draft combine invites and who doesn't. So you've got that. They again to reset. They still have 2 scholarships available as things stand right now. We know that they have multiple players slash targets mulling reclassifications in Jaron Stevenson and Elliot Cadeau. Excuse me. The latest on Ian Jackson, his people and those around him have been pretty firm in saying that he's staying in 2024, and they've said that pretty consistently over the last 6 or 7 months. So that's where things stand with him. They still again are going to look at the portal. They're going to look at the NBA draft stuff and just see what happens. The team could be set or it could not be set. That's why our advice has always been to wait until kind of mid-June before you say, okay, this is what the 2023-2024 roster is going to look like. And again, those key dates, if we want to go back to those, the portal is open for like another 10 days. I think it's May 11th that it closes. So we are getting towards the end of that 60-day period that started on March 13th. And then the NBA Combine kicks off on May 15th. But you can see a lot of folks are kind of starting to leak their invites on Twitter or online. Some of the national guys are leaking those. And then May 31st is the date by which people who enter the NBA draft can withdraw and still maintain their college eligibility. Again, if you enter the portal on May 10th, it doesn't mean you have to make a decision on a new school by May 11th. It just means you have to be in the portal by then. Conceivably, Joey Powell could enter the portal on May 11th and decide on August 15th, as long as he was in good academic standing, that he wanted to attend University X, that he wanted to go to Stony Brook. And as long as all his academic stuff was in hand, he could wait it out and just show up on campus. So you don't have to give a verbal commitment or anything once you enter the portal.
I'm going to tell you, as much as I love the Seawolves, my academic stuff is not in order. So no danger of me entering the portal, nor would there be any danger of anybody wanting me from the portal. Anyway, so I've seen a couple of folks too asking about players that UNC can't confirm about. I also want to say, and this isn't from Sherrell, this is from me. Sherrell has a lot of folks that he works with behind the scenes that a lot of stuff's kind of said off the record. I think it's important for fans and folks listening to this show and participate in the show to remember, like, you can't really, like, all of this stuff that's being done behind the scenes through feelers and runners and intermediaries and all that stuff. Like, sometimes talking about that can sour the possibilities of that happening. And again, I'm not versed in that. I can't quote that being specifically true, but knowing what I know from doing this is that a lot of times, speculation becoming known fact can actually make things go the wrong way. Anyway, I hope I didn't overstep any bounds there, Sherrell, in what I just said, but I do think there's a couple of other questions too. Some folks have asked about Simeon Wilcher and expectations for him for the first year, and I don't know that I don't know what the expectations for Wilcher are, but Nathan Keener's question is below. Just, are we expecting too much from Simeon in year one on campus? Are we guaranteed two and not one and done? I'll throw that to you, Sherrell, because I have nowhere to go with that.
I actually think it's the other way around. I think people have kind of forgotten about Wilcher because of everything in the portal being kind of flashy and new. Wilcher's been committed, almost, not quite 2 years, so like 18 months he's been committed. He signed this past November, and a really good player that if UNC signed him tomorrow, everybody would be ecstatic. But because he signed, or excuse me, because he committed so long ago, it's kind of like, oh yeah, they've got Wilcher, they're good. He's a solid player. But I mean, he has a chance to be a really dynamic, guard, especially in UNC's rotation with the way that Hubert Davis plays. He's got length. He's tall. He can really, really attack. And I think that's something that when you start looking at how the roster plays out next year, guys who UNC is going to need someone, whether it's starting or off the bench, in addition to RJ Davis, who can, when the shot clock is at 7, just put their head down and get to the rim. And I don't know that as the roster is currently constructed with the transfers that have been brought in and with the guys coming back, if there was really anyone else kind of his size with his skill set able to do that. So that's gonna be huge. And then I've said it, I think we've all said it. Sean said it. You watched it, Joey. You said the same thing. Defensively, he has a chance to be a really good player. Obviously, like any freshman, he's got to put on some weight. He's got to get used to the rigors of ACC basketball, the strength of the other guards, the speed of the other guards. But from a just measurables perspective, he has everything you want to one day be an effective defender. And I think that's how, very much like Seth Trimble last year, the minutes that he got when he played really well is when he was engaged defensively and really harassing the guards on the other team. So if he can do that, knock down an open shot, I think there's going to be plenty of playing time for him.
And I think we saw last year that Trimble hit that freshman wall. And I know you've talked about the freshman wall before. Like, there's just a certain point in time of that grind of their first year in college where kids that are coming in from high school or prep school are just absolutely gassed. And they kind of reach a place where it's either mental or physical or both. that they start underperforming a little bit.
And think about this, Joey, with the COVID year and with
Oh
all the
yeah,
transfer stuff. This is, again, not to disparage anyone, but last year Carolina was playing a lot of old teams. They were playing guys who were 23, 24, 25 years old.
yeah,
And so Seth Trimble and the other freshmen are coming from playing guys who are 17 and 18. And Trimble himself is a young 18. So there's a 7-year difference between some of the guys who he was playing against and him. And we all know that such a huge difference in not just maturity, but also just body maturity between 18 and 25. It's a huge difference. And that's going to be the case with teams who are playing Carolina this year. Carolina's going to have a 25-year-old, a couple of 24-year-olds. Actually, I think 3 24-year-olds, a 25-year-old, and like a 22 or 23-year-old probably in their starting lineup, I would think. So that's going to be an advantage for UNC is that they're a bunch of grown men playing in college basketball still. So anyway, I think
bring in all the 2 desserts at the KNW guys. Like
right,
I want
exactly.
all those guys.
Dinner at 4:45 sharp. Yeah, so I think to your point, that's one of the reasons that this particular freshman class may have hit the wall a little bit earlier than once in the past because
Yeah,
they're not playing against 21-year-olds who are seniors like they would have been before. They're playing against 24-year-old 6-year seniors, and that's never happened before. So that's something to think about too.
absolutely. Well, appreciate it, man. Last thing before we get out of here, I always like to do this when we're pre-recording the show, so I'll do it in this one too. Sherrell, you got 2 cents for me before we get out the door.
I don't think I do. It's
And we are not
been
talking NFL draft results. I
oh
know you
I
were looking forward to that. We
oh
are not. I don't care
I,
about your draft board.
I mean I'll tell you Keely Ringo.
Oh my god,
Number. I think he was number 79 on my personal
that
board.
is theft.
I don't have a board, everybody. I don't have a board. No, it's been quiet for the first time. I put quiet in parentheses for the first time in a while for UNC basketball, and that's a good thing. We started, I don't want to say preaching, evangelizing. We started telling people early in this process that it was going to take time,
Yeah,
and we're now not quite 2 months into it. I think UNC's in a good spot, but I don't think the roster is done, and so you just have to let it play out before you start giving your minutes projections and trying to figure out who's going to start and who's going to be
yeah,
upset and all that stuff. The portal works both ways and it doesn't close for another 10 to 11 days. So the first time you can even talk about what the roster might look like for me is May 11th. Last year, I'll keep saying it again. Gordon Walton told everyone, he and his family told everyone they were coming back to Carolina. They were asked
yeah,
multiple times, they're coming back to Carolina. And then that last day before the portal closed, we see his name in the portal. So stuff can change in and out. That can happen in other schools too, and it could be advantageous for UNC. But just take everything as fluid until May 11th. Consider it kind of as like a slushy from May 11th until June 15th, and then it'll be frozen and intact on June 15th, and then you can go forward with what you think the roster might look like, or how you think the staff did, or any of that stuff. But that would be my advice. Again, I'm sorry to be repetitive, but I think it's just important to keep hammering it home because it's easy to get lost in this stuff in the day to day. A week ago, I guess a week ago, yeah, 9 days ago, Carolina people thought that Carolina was going to lose Harrison Ingram. Cormac Ryan hadn't committed. That was 9 days ago. That was 9 days ago. So this
and
stuff
everybody's
moves.
like, the roster can't be done with just these 2 guys.
Right,
It's this,
right.
and everybody's
And so
trying to see
that's
how Wojcik's going to start and Withers is going to play at the like. Just yeah, that's a
yeah.
lot of
So
that.
it's moving. It moves so fast. It makes everything feel slow when really we've kind of zoomed through these last 2 months. So
Yeah.
that's my advice. Just hold on out for another month and a half, and then the roster will be set, and we can move forward.
Love it, man. Love the perspective. And again, shout out to everybody who's in the chat tonight. We loved interacting with you guys. I think it's if we can keep this going, we might continue to do some of this. And obviously we can't get to every question everybody asks, and some of them we just have to skip over just because there's no real point for us to answer some of them. But appreciate everybody kind of interacting with us and being a part of the show this evening. Shout out to Johnny Tshirt for sponsoring us. Shout out to John Bauman for getting me set up with the really sweet tutorial today on how to run this live stream thing. I don't think I broke anything yet. And shout out to Tommy Ashley for giving us the feedback and making sure that everything was good, because he's usually the one that sets us up and lets everything run for us. So appreciate him taking the training wheels off tonight and letting us rock this out. But until next time, for Sean Moran, I know he's off swaddling a kid somewhere, and for Sherrell McMillan, I'm Joey Powell. We'll catch you all next time on the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Like.